Hello, everybody, and welcome to AstroSpeak, an irregularly scheduled show. It's a chat show formatted for featuring astrologers arguing, cooperating, agreeing, disagreeing, inspiring each other, and sharing their knowledge. We will be asking questions and asking for feedback and opinions, but I mentioned everybody here, please be aware we want to keep it short, to the point, and succinct. We want to have a lively and active show. And all of these questions involve things that I'm pretty sure all of us have experienced at some point in our career. My name is Anthony S. Picco. I'm an astrologer from New York City. And my co-host from the UK is Michaela Villiers-Kendall, and she is a fine astrologer too. So we basically have a bunch of questions that we'll start asking. And anybody who wants to answer, put your hand up, wave, whatever it is you need to do, and we'll see who has what to say. And of course, I have to bring up my list of questions. Okay, my first question, we all know about lunar returns, solar returns, Saturn returns, Jupiter returns, even Uranus returns, if you're old enough. Do you use a Mars return chart? And if so, what for? I have used them on rare occasions when somebody's asking career questions or work questions. I can see a Mars return as kind of another cycle of work and action taking place. But has anybody used a Mars return, or even for that matter, a Venus or a Mercury return? Yeah, anybody? Just unmute yourself if you want to speak, Mitch.
I've used them all.
You used them all?
Yeah, when I was younger, I used to use a lot of solar returns. I don't use them quite as much anymore because I find them kind of iffy. But yeah, I mean, there's something. My brother did a great deal of work on lunar return charts. Every month he would pinpoint and draw up the chart for it. So I think they're valid.
And well, how do you why look at a Mars return as opposed to a Venus return? What do you get differently from each one?
Well,
or you just look at them openly?
I think it's the general feeling of the planet itself. We all have our ideas of what each of these planets mean, but Mars, as you pointed out, is action. And Mars transits, look, Mars is going into Sagittarius now. And there are two wars that could start at any moment. One in Ukraine, the other in Taiwan. And I'm looking at those very carefully now as to whether the Mars return of Joe Biden or somebody political has validity. I think that's, as most astrology, is a matter of waiting and seeing and going through these, repeatedly.
Ryan, you got something to say? Don't forget to unmute.
Yeah, hi. While I won't necessarily use a return chart of the inner planets, I'll definitely look at the phase relationship between, say, transiting Mars and a natal Mars. And someone has any issue up with courage or choice, personal power, any Mars issue, I will definitely pay attention to the phase relationship there for further indication as is this person waxing with their Martian energy, or are they waning in some form? So that's something that I definitely look at.
Anybody else have any comment about Mars or Venus or Saturn returns, or if they use them at all?
Yeah, so in my work, I'm the oddball out because I practice predictive astrology. I use the planetary returns. I use them all, but I use them at the very end if I'm having a difficult time getting to what my client is looking for. But just like Ryan said, the phase relationships are so incredibly important with the planetary returns, like how they're moving, but also planet to planet. But with the returns specifically, we can watch the evolution of a life event. So with the Mars return, it's going to trigger that 2-year phase. So whatever occurred during that last Mars return, when we hit the sextile, square, trine, opposition, whether it's separating or applying, we can kind of get a taste for what is going to resurface from that initial conjunction or return event. And I find that to be very useful for me.
Anybody else, or will Michaela ask her question? We trade questions off everybody, by the way. I ask one, Michaela asks one, and it's your turn, Michaela.
I have
Oh, I
one
was
more,
just-
one
Oh, wait,
more
wait.
point.
Go ahead.
Okay,
I'm
go ahead,
sorry.
go ahead, Mitch. That's okay.
I happen to agree with what Ryan said. I don't think the returns are as effective as the transits, so to speak, of whatever planet we're dealing with. Yes, the Saturn return, we're all familiar with, of course. That's a big to do, the 2, or if you're lucky, 3 times that it happens in life. But I don't think that they're that
Significant, yeah. Okay. Understandable. So, Michaela, fire away.
Yeah, just about that too. I'd never done a Mars return, but I drew mine up. Just to see. Mine was in March, and it is quite good because it's in it's in my 7th, and it has and it rules the 6th house of that chart. So this year really has been about my partner being really ill all over the summer and still ill, and so it's all about his health and everything. So that's pretty good. I mean, right now Mars is opposing my Mars, so I'm having my Mars opposition, and I'm finding that really, it's conjunct the transiting node and everything in Gemini, and I'm sorry, in Sag, the South Node, and so it's really stressful. But it's good. I mean, it's a challenge, isn't it? Mars is all about, it gets us fired up. So hey,
I had a client once who asked me, Mars was retrograding over her couple of her planets and back again, and she was like, when is this going to be over? And I said, this is a Mars return. Like, you can't hide from a Mars return and wait till it's over. Something has to be done,
the firing line.
Yeah, so.
Yep, exactly.
Okay.
Desire, nature. Right. So, okay. Oh, mine's a rather long question, but I'll break it up like you suggested. So I just wanted to get a feel for where everyone was during this pandemic phase, starting at the Saturn-Pluto South Node conjunction and the Cancer lunar eclipse back in January 2020, which, I mean, to us, it's obvious, it seemed like the significator of the pandemic, the COVID-19. The first death was recorded on January 11th, amazingly sandwiched in between the lunar eclipse and the Saturn-Pluto South Node conjunction. Amazing in Capricorn. So ever since there, where, it might be nice to take stock of how we've got through that, but perhaps the main significators, like the major aspect perhaps that was transited by the Saturn-Pluto conjunction, or the lunar eclipse, or the Uranus-Saturn square maybe, or any of the biggies. What else was? Oh, the transiting nodes, something that really nutshelled it to us and has challenged us and maybe taught us something, because that's what it's all about. So, has anyone?
I can say this much. First of all, I was already getting a Pluto on my Mercury, Sun, Midheaven, North Node, and Chiron when Saturn and Pluto decided to get together on my Sun on my birthday in 2020. And on top of it, Uranus is on my ascendant and squaring, Saturn is squaring my Saturn. So I've been kind of hard to divorce myself from the pandemic as a separate entity. I did find myself oddly, and I don't mean to sound morbid when I say this, there's some part of me that felt like finally when the pandemic came, it's like I felt like I've been waiting for it in some strange way, not out of any maliciousness, but like this was the 2x4 we all needed in the back of the head, to sort of wake us up. And I almost felt a little bit like this, finally we're going to be able to hopefully shift something. We're still in the middle of figuring it out. So for me, I've already been doing with Pluto for the past 5 years, going over everything. So it's been kind of hard to separate it out from there. But I've managed not to have any personal loss. I mean, I had, in-laws and second uncles and stuff that died, but nothing in my particular circle. So that's my personal experience of what I've had with the pandemic, referring to my chart in particular. Anyone else? Good.
Oh, and what do you feel has been the main message of that transit?
Well, I've been hunkering down and trying to become more public. I don't want to say more than I'm writing a book right now, and it's not about astrology, but and I'm aware that it's midheaven stuff. I'm coming more out into the world. I've done more of these Zoom meetings. I've become more public for whatever reason. I don't know if I'm the voice of wisdom, but I did end up in the news the day the pandemic started. Somebody came into the coffee shop I was in, stuck a microphone in my face, and asked my opinion of the upcoming quarantine. And suddenly all my friends are calling me saying, "We saw you on the news. What you said was great." And I'm like, okay, I don't get that. So that, I suppose, is part of it.
Run for president next.
Mitch, you had your hand up, right?
Well, just a personal note. My son opposes Tony's very closely. So I had the Saturn, Jupiter, Pluto conjunct in opposition to my son in 2020. And in January, I got the flu, which took me 6 weeks to stop coughing. Finally stopped coughing, and then I broke out in a rash over 80% of my body.
Oh, God.
Then in April, I was diagnosed with COVID.
Oh, no.
So it whacked me pretty hard. I'm in good shape. I take care of myself. I, live on light and filtered water. And I didn't go to the hospital with the COVID, but I was pretty sick all winter long. And then I lost a very, very dear friend in the building that collapsed in Florida. So, it did kick us in the ass. And Tony, the truth is that the pandemic put Joe Biden in the White House. I mean,
true.
On some levels, I'm not sure that without that added layer, Trump might not have been reelected. But it certainly was a huge transitional period for the whole world.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, exactly.
When Trump got elected for 2016, I remember turning to my wife and saying, the first crisis comes along and it's all over. And that's exactly what happened. Trump's first crisis, and it just fell apart on him because he couldn't handle it. So, anybody else, any comments about how the pandemic and this astrologically affected them in some way? Pluto, Saturn, Uranus?
Well, I'll go.
Sure.
So the Saturn Pluto conjunction was in my 7th house, and I thought, oh my God, what does this mean? Because I had no idea. Well, and then the eclipses were the nodes, and the eclipses were across my 5th, 6th, 11th, and 12th houses. Well, with one of the eclipses, that was when our fearless leader, Linda, passed away. And my friend Robin and I inherited the group, and as Linda had asked us to carry it on in case something had happened to her. So that's, 11th house groups, friends. I have also in the very recent lost another friend, and a few cats, in the last a couple of cats in the last couple of years. So it kind of, because it spans my 5th, 6th, 11th, and 12th, there's also, 12th house, there's been a lot of pulling back inside to kind of reflect on everything that's going on. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah, it's heavy. I mean, but our job as an astrologers is to try to extract the wisdom from it and what we're being shown, and exactly. And I guess as individuals, each facet shows itself, part of it shows itself to us, and that's what's
one more note, while I was going through all of those illnesses, I was busier than I've ever been.
Wow, really?
I worked straight through the flu and the pandemic and everything else, and the COVID. And I had so many clients. Well, of course, when the world's ending, we're all very popular. So there is always the good and the bad, and you have to look for the two. And you know, as we get closer to the midterm elections and whatever people's individual politics are, this period is going to show us something, and it's going to change the world in a way that we can't even imagine now.
Yeah, exactly. So you drew on an inner strength, in other words, you drew on more than you
my God,
knew you
yeah.
had.
And you know, Michaela, I always find that when, especially as an astrologer, if I'm going through a tough period and other people need me.
Yeah.
I remember when I lost my dog Goldie. She was the greatest thing that ever happened to me, and I had to put her down in the middle of the night. And the next morning, I didn't sleep, of course, I was up all night. And the next morning, I had to do a very important health read for somebody, a medical read. They needed an operation. I was perfect. Soon as the reading was over, I felt.
Yeah, sure.
Exactly. We draw our strength.
Yeah,
from
that's
these
right.
things.
Yeah, exactly. Wonderful. Does anyone else want to? Yeah, yeah. Okay.
Yeah, we're talking about the 2020 conjunction with Pluto, Saturn, and Capricorn, right? I just want to make sure before I
kick off the pandemic. Yeah.
Well, the pandemic, it's interesting, right? Because I have like a Neptune ascendant 0 degree kind of aspect. So I live with, like, even though I'm a Capricorn, I live with one foot in another realm and another foot firmly planted on the ground at the same time. So like with the pandemic, I mean, I've been tracking this stuff for a long time. I kind of saw that coming. For myself, though, I have Pluto. Pluto's been hanging out on my sun for a while, moving into my Mercury. And it's also squaring my natal Pluto right now. So like fun times. So what I've been learning is, I mean, during that time, I was starting to kind of really see just how much I've been trying to control my reality, control my career direction, control my image, even just like controlling even the most minuscule things. The Pluto-Saturn conjunction really showed it to me because I also have the south node of Pluto right on my sun and Saturn there too. So I was really kind of seeing it in society, how we're all, we get our security from planning and controlling and marking calendars. And so when this pandemic happened, I don't think the general population saw it coming, but I do think people like ourselves who look at the cycles and the rhythms, we're seeing it. So for myself, it was more just an opportunity to use that Pluto energy and that Saturn energy to really get very real about where maybe I'm addicted to control and security and all of the dark side of Capricorn. Because even though I'm a triple Capricorn, I don't want to be too rigid. I'd like to soften up a bit. So yeah, I used that opportunity to just be real about what I think I could improve on. I also have they're all in the 6th house, my Mercury. Wow. So it's like, how can I fix my own mess? And then how can I also use that to improve my services and how I serve other people? So that was my experience, and that's continuing to be my experience, of course. Yeah.
Well, I mean, now with the Pluto Venus conjunction, it's so we can talk about that after. But yeah.
That's and then it goes retro on top of Pluto, so that'll be interesting. Just a few days away, I believe. So a different question, a little lighter, and I'm just curious. There's Mark Edmund Jones, I think, is the one who created all the chart patterns, whether it's a locomotive or a bucket or whatever it is. And I'm wondering, sure, I understand if there's like 8 planets in one quadrant, it's intense. But do you find the patterns in general, do you find them useful? Or do you find them kind of a nuance, but not something that really speaks to you? Just what are you feeling about so-called chart patterns as a whole? I'm not talking about, he's got a T-square, they've got a yaw, but that pattern as a whole that was put out by, again, I believe Mark Edmund Jones was the first one to popularize it. Any thoughts?
Yeah, I find them useful, but then I started thinking about, if you start adding in any asteroids, that totally changes the whole thing, because they're always in opposition to those bundles. And so then I wonder how much power they still have.
That's a good point. Yeah.
But they do still have, there's still a concentration of energy in one area. And so that's still, that part of it is still valid.
Yeah, I always find when there's all of them on one side and one planet's on the other side, I'm always very interested in that one planet, because clearly it's got to hold down one half of the chart. But I don't necessarily think of it as a bucket. Ryan, you have your hand up, so let her rip.
This I will say about this question and related questions is that when we focus on something, we can project or read as much as we want to into it, whether it be chart shapes, whether it be phase relations, whether it be, traditional rulers, whether it be this style, that style, asteroids, fixed stars. We could do, I'm sure any one of us could do at least a small mini reading just on someone's asteroid Vesta. And our client could get a good amount of information from that. So, I guess my answer to the question, my 2 cents would be, they're as important as we say.
Yeah.
Yeah, I get a little something out of them, but I don't get dragged away into them. That's all. And we all have our own technique. Sure, some of us like buckets and locomotives, and others like aspects or whatever it might be. So that's understandable. Any other comment about this, or shall we move on to Michaela's next question? Take it away, Michaela.
Well, I don't have as many questions as you, because it's going to probably take a long time, the questions I have, but
that's okay.
Okay, so moving on to the Venus-Pluto conjunction, it's going to come back again, isn't it? When Venus is going retrograde on the full moon day, isn't that right? That's on
close to that, yeah.
19th of December. So, and then it'll go back over this Venus-Pluto conjunction. It'll meet Pluto again. So, and then again, I think at Christmas, my goodness, it goes back at Christmas, 24th, 25th, to meet Pluto for the last time. No, it's not the last time.
No, then it keeps going backwards, and then
it keeps going back and forth. Whoa, that's going to be tough, isn't it? I mean, that's going to be a tough one. But I think we're already feeling it, aren't we? And it's sort of echoing, and it's at the same sort of degrees as it's very close to the Saturn-Pluto conjunction. So again, if anyone sort of, it really feeds into the original Saturn-Pluto conjunction, because it's not far off anyway. So it's sort of like taking it to another level. It's taking it deeper into our Venus, I think you would say. And right now we're really feeling that, aren't we? Because, it's affecting everything, our finances, our security. Yeah, go ahead.
Well, I just want to briefly mention the third conjunction is March 3rd, when they're both Venus and Pluto are 27 degrees. Right. And ironically, at that exact moment, Mars is at 28 degrees Capricorn. So with the third time Venus and Pluto get back together, Mars is on top of it.
Oh, no.
Yeah, well, one thing about it, go ahead, Mitch, you first. Unmute.
Oh, I said, go ahead. No,
go ahead.
Well, as we always say, in traditional astrology, the outer planets are doing the job, and the inner planets are the trigger. And we're still living with the Saturn, Pluto, Jupiter conjunction. It has gone away just because they've moved into other planets. We have to, into other signs, we have to assimilate it all. And all of the inner planets conjuncting Saturn or Pluto during this period are, let's call them reminders or new lessons. And I've always found that Venus-Pluto is such a demanding energy, especially to the personal relationships as Venus, that when you have a triple pass like this, we're really dealing with an extended period where relationships are going to change. And we're seeing a lot of this too in what's happening in Congress, in the Supreme Court, abortion rights, the January 6th, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, basically values.
Yeah, it's Pluto. And one more little thing I want to mention, then I'll stop. Pluto, I do a lot of financial astrology for those of you who don't know my work, and I traded commodities for many years. And Pluto rules oil. I've had arguments with people who say Neptune rules oil, and I say to them, show me your data. I'll show you 10 years of studying Pluto, and I'll show you exactly why this is the case. And when Saturn conjuncted Pluto, oil went to below zero.
Ooh.
It cost more money for the companies to hold the oil than it was worth, and they would pay you to take the oil out of their refineries. That has never happened. It probably will never happen again. That is Saturn conjunct Pluto in Capricorn, showing how antiquated fossil fuels are.
Mm.
And we aren't going to suddenly change. Mankind isn't going to just give up its oil, but these are indicators. And with Venus, which rules money, conjuncting Pluto, more and more issues about oil and fossil fuel and climate change and this gigantic iceberg that's about to fall off Antarctica and. All of it all adds up. And astrology isn't about one or two aspects. It's about the whole evolution. Anyway, that's
true. Exactly.
And Venus does bring in finances too. I mean, that's certainly luxuries and whatnot.
Yeah, and it rules the second house, of course.
And never mind what's going to happen to everybody's relationships when Pluto and Capricorn are together.
Yes. It's really interesting that because I've noticed that before. I'm sure a lot of us have, that there's often movies, films, series, books come out that reflect the transits. So right now, I went to see The House of Gucci with my son. And that's so Venus, Pluto. I mean, it's just Venus, Pluto all over it. And it's about, power plays, huge amount of money, and betrayal and all that can go wrong, when you've got too much of everything.
In the fashion industry, yeah.
Yeah. So it was very good.
I have a question. Does anybody have an opinion about the new West Side Story?
Oh, right.
I think it's a very powerful moment.
Oh, wow.
With Stephen Sondheim just dying and Spielberg deciding to do a remake of West Side Story, which has always been a complicated, I think it's an incredible score.
That's Venus Pluto too. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Venus Pluto.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Isn't that interesting? And it's coming out.
It is. Wow.
Anyway.
There you go. Yeah. So.
And it's also. I also want to add that if there's an attempt to actually readdress the ethnic and the racial consciousness, because obviously it's not 1960, and suddenly we have to, diversity and it's become much more popular now. So, and there's actually been some editorials of people complaining it's still Puerto Ricans versus the whites kind of a thing. And it's, but it's still being addressed. No, you're right. But it does tie into the death and the artistic rebirth and everything else. It makes perfect sense.
Yeah, absolutely.
Any other Venus Pluto comments out there?
Yes, I have natally Venus conjunct Pluto. And like I was saying before, the Saturn Pluto conjunction was in my 7th house. And I think what the big picture for me is getting me out with other people and learning how to navigate and understand other people. I, of course, having it natally, intensity in my relationships has always been an option, and with this, I think I guess maybe in Capricorn, it's kind of leveling it out a little bit, but it's also putting me in touch. I mean, having this, this group, kind of fall in our laps has put me in touch with an awful lot of people, and I'm developing individual relationships with everybody, and learning how to navigate, communication and
Absolutely. Yeah, that is very Venus Pluto, isn't it? Because Pluto is the is huge groups too, isn't it? It's
The masses, yeah, the masses, sure.
yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So Ryan, you got.
Go on.
I'm sorry.
Go on, Ryan. No,
I saw Ryan's got his hand up.
Go on, Ryan.
Ryan, let her rip.
Yeah, as a farmer of 25 years, I'll grow 10,000 zinnias. And they're beautiful and they're amazing and lovely. And then frost will come and they will die. And I have a choice. I can lament the death of the zinnias, or I can celebrate their having existed and honor the cycle and the rhythm of nature, which means that I can now plow those zinnias in. Their flowers and stems and leaves will break down and create more humic acid in the soil. And the soil, as it sleeps over winter, will be fertile and rich the next spring, especially if I added a cover crop or more compost for that matter. The point being is, in context of our relationships, there are cycles and there's seasons and there's rhythms. And one of those cycles and seasons and rhythms is I'll coin the term, a necessary endarkenment, where we have to engage all of the places that we don't want to look at, that we'd rather not look at, where I want the pretty flowers. No, we have to understand that things sometimes need to break down so that they can be regenerated for next year's flowers. And so understanding that process in the context of our own personal Venusian life, then we do what's a great practical application. We go to therapy and we talk about the really hard stuff and we work through our junk so as to come to that more beautiful place.
Sure.
Just 2 cents there.
No, that's
almost 3 cents. I think it's good.
Yeah, it's Persephone. Yeah, gotta go to the underworld.
Right.
Cyclical, and that's where we are. In the underworld. We're loving it.
Sarah, you got something to say?
Yeah, I'm definitely loving it. My whole life is a constant existential crisis. So when a new one pops up that everyone else has to deal with, it's like, cool, we're in this together. To steal that phrase.
Great perspective.
But I think about Pluto and it being in Capricorn, and like I was saying, the lessons around control and our reality. And then I think about Venus being ruling Uranus and Taurus right now, and Pluto actually being ruled by Saturn in Aquarius, and how all those energies are kind of playing ping pong together, or pinball. Like, try not to pontificate, Anthony. Sorry, try my best. But I see
okay.
all of that. I think about the individuation process with Uranus. How in EA, Saturn is the shell and the root that kind of contains the Uranian energy and the Plutonian energy. There can be, I mean, it depends on where we're at and what our focus and priorities are, what our values are. But self-determination may be an option for us to develop during this time. More self-autonomy and less identification with our nation, our race, our tribe, our ancestors even, but not to forsake them or throw the baby out with the bathwater, but for us to develop into our own whatever iteration, like what are we supposed to be in this iteration, So I know these are the types of things that I'm looking at in my life with my North Node right on my rising, so I'm kind of being called to develop that for myself. And when I see this transit, I think that might be something that other people are experiencing in various ways as well, depending on what house that conjunction with Venus and Pluto is, showing up, and it's going to vary. But we can see it in the United States. I mean, there's a major identity crisis happening, even in Canada, we're having that issue too. But of course, those are reflections, I think, of what is reverberating in the microcosm as well. So
all
when
around
Mars,
the world.
what's that? Sorry?
All around the world. It's yeah, exactly.
Yeah, exactly. And so like when Mars conjuncts that, and on March 3rd, like Anthony was talking about, since it's exalted, in Capricorn, that actually might be a boon to anyone who's willing to look at what is brought up during this period. So I just wanted to throw that out there. We might be able to manifest what we're really wanting to, if we're honest.
Yeah.
I do want to say, Sarah, as a fellow Capricorn, pontification is our second language. It just comes naturally. But I do want to point out how, part of what's going on now is fascinating to me, because it's really it's Aquarian energy. We have people going, I should be able to decide what I want to do. Meanwhile, we have to pay attention to the health of the entire planet. And I always consider Aquarius the individual in service to humanity, the water bearer. So it's funny that this crisis is very Aquarian, and I'm all for the individual, but not when the individual is going to, kill my uncle or aunt because they're not getting their mask on or whatever it might be. I'm believing the story being told. I'm not thinking, but it is a curious Aquarian kind of energy going on. I don't want to do it, but other people can. So no, I get that.
Uranus squaring Saturn. Yeah. I mean, Saturn squaring Uranus.
And that too, yeah.
Exactly. It's the battle
Mitch?
between the two.
Just to remind everybody, Pluto does, of course.
Mm-hmm.
It digs the truth out no matter what, and you can't hide from Pluto. And we are going through our Pluto return in America. And, as the old saying goes, how America goes, so goes the world. It's true, whatever empire is running things.
Mm-hmm.
The British Empire ran things, was true for them too, and so on. Probably the Egyptians.
Oh, yeah. Rome.
But what Pluto also does in Scorpio, which gets that bum rap in astrology, Scorpio, that's the sign of rejuvenation, death and rebirth. Without it, we don't plant a new crop.
Exactly.
Like Ryan's analogy.
Like Ryan Zinniers, yeah.
Exactly.
And that's
just
exactly what's happening in our society right now. Yeah.
And we are in the last stages of Pisces. We've said that before, but we do have to keep reiterating that as the big picture, the last stage of the age of Pisces.
Well, it takes hundreds of years. It takes hundreds of years to change it.
Exactly.
Age.
And so
not a long weekend in the Hamptons.
Exactly. We've been going through the change, for hundreds of years already. But now it seems like we have accelerated. We've got to the point where we're really.
But isn't it interesting that we're leaving the age of Pisces, and on its way out, we get this tremendous pandemic, which is Neptune.
Exactly.
Perfect. I mean, it's just,
funny.
Last little kiss off. Yeah.
It's funny.
Just so you remember me.
Yeah, but it's true, isn't it? I mean, with the Saturn-Pluto conjunction, everyone's it's like Neptune sneaks in there, and everyone was sort of ignoring Neptune in Pisces in its strongest position. And sextile.
Many years ago, I did some lectures upstate. I was writing for a newspaper up in Phoenicia, New York, and I went up and did a couple of lectures, and I said there is a pandemic coming. I was way ahead of my time. But it was Neptune's transit through Pisces. I said, there's got to be something. I was a little early. What can I tell you?
Look, when the pandemic hit, some people are going like, how come astrologers didn't predict it? It's like, excuse me? How many astrologers have you been talking to?
No one listened as usual.
But right. I will say, Mitch, years ago, I was talking to Mitch when Neptune was in Pisces, and I was like, beginning of the Trump years, and I'm like, why are so many people so delusional? And he said, Neptune's in Pisces. And I'm like, yeah, okay, that makes a certain amount of sense. I'm very Pollyanna-like, and I'm thinking, but we should all become wonderfully spiritual right now. But delusion is certainly possible,
Also, don't forget, America's going through its Neptune opposition.
Yeah.
This is an extreme, and squaring its Mars. This is an extremely powerful delusion.
Yeah.
I mean, Trumpism. Again, not to get. I try to avoid direct political confrontation. I don't see any point to it. I'm not going to change anybody's mind.
Well, I've got a great idea. Why don't we create an alternate universe? Yeah, that's what we'll do. You can just put on goggles, and instead of seeing the hellscape around you, you can see a virtual world of waterfalls, butterflies, and rainbows. Neptune
That's
and
probably what
Pisces.
will
That
happen.
will solve everything, Neptune.
It is
You have to-
happening. They've invented it.
Metaverse. All I have to say, metaverse.
I'm holding out for unicorns, so you have to include that.
Well,
Anyway,
wait till
Oh, yeah,
Jupiter
they're
comes.
Capricornian.
Wait till
Jupiter
Jupiter gets to Neptune
yeah,
in
Oh,
April.
It should be
Well-
good.
well, it'll be interesting, as the old
Light
line
relief.
goes.
Well, hopefully there'll be a big upswing in the arts. One can only hope.
Oh, yeah.
That would be nice.
It
I
would
wouldn't
be
mind
nice.
that.
Well, you know that the greatest art happens when the world's ending. So, in the 60s, why was the music in the 60s so great? Because thousands of people were dying every day in Vietnam, among other things.
Yeah.
Crises.
Who do we sacrifice for the next hit single? Anyway, so moving on to something a little different. Do you have any weird stories of unusual chart manifestation that you recall from clients? I had one client, and it amazed the heck out of me. Whenever the first couple of times I spoke to her, I couldn't make sense out of it. Then I started talking about secondary progressions. She continually responds to secondary progressions as if they are transits, and doesn't respond to transits, which, part of me is like, well, this is news to me. And she's drifted away. I don't have her chart in front of me or anything, but I remember every time I did her chart, she responded to secondary progressions and not transits. Do you have a client that manifested their chart in a way that was sort of like, what the heck? That maybe stays with you in terms of like, well, I wouldn't have used my chart that way, but I guess you could do it that way. Or is that question too obscure?
Everyone responds differently. You can't be too set
Yeah.
in your interpretation, because it seems like you try different things and then suddenly it will click for a person, for a client. Or
I think you have to look at the charts in layers.
Yeah.
I don't think it's one, Tony, just like when you and I do medical stuff, and I tell you that every problem takes place on the physical, the psychological, and the spiritual level.
Yeah.
And the goal for a medical astrologer is to find where it began. Is it a genetic thing? Is it a karmic thing?
Mhm.
Or did you happen to walk into Starbucks and somebody sneezed in your face and that's why you're sick?
Even
But
that's not.
No, of course not. Of course not. But that's, but I wanted to just tell you one little quick story. When I was very young, I had a reading from Isabel Hickey. I'm sure you all.
Wow.
Well, Izzy was my first teacher, and up in Cambridge, and she gave me a reading. And my brother was in the room at the time because David was already studying with Izzy. And she told me, because I have a Jupiter bucket, to bring up what Tony was talking about before, I have Jupiter in the 4th house and all the other Ptolemaic planets and the outer planets too above it. So I consider it a real bucket. And it's in the 4th house. And Izzy said to me, you're going to live out the end of your life in a foreign country. And I said, well, the reading was mind-blowing. Izzy was a great astrologer, and I couldn't believe what she was pulling out. I said, that's never going to happen. I love America. When Trump got elected, I thought her words came back to me. And now I'm looking at Costa Rica. It's warm. They got a lot of animals. It's cheap. I don't. If I'm really
Good healthcare. Yeah.
Healthcare, yeah, right.
Really?
So who knows?
It shows you don't rule anything. Yeah, exactly. And with Jupiter, yeah.
Well, Jupiter, the 4th house being the end of life,
right?
And Jupiter being foreign places and expansion.
Great
I could
planet,
also,
right?
maybe I'll move to Mars. I don't know. I
Oh,
understand
no.
they have cities up there.
No, you don't want to do.
Only that's an in-joke between you and me.
Costa Rica's got better.
They have great
Costa-
dental care in Costa Rica.
Costa
too.
Rica, Portugal, Holland, there's some nice places. The Bahamas. I think New Jersey is no longer part of America.
Was it ever? So, Michaela, do you have another question? Do you want me to whip one of mine
Right.
out? Whatever you want to do.
Another of yours is fine. Yeah. No, I've only got one
Okay.
more, I think. A couple.
All right. This is sort of a casual thing. Do you do psychic fair quickie readings? And if so, how do you do a fast read? Do you have a particular method? Like somebody sits down, you're seeing the chart for the first time, you've got 15 minutes to give them a quickie look at their chart without sending them in a wrong direction. Do you have do you do them? Which took me, by the way, 25 years to start doing them. And I'm wondering, if you do them, what particular things might you use, and what's your, there we go, Ryan.
Full disclosure, I am a Sun Neptune conjunction.
Oh.
In Sagittarius, 6th house.
Wow.
So I thrive on getting the ego out of the way in the situation of service, 6th house, having the answers, Sagittarius. They're not my answers, Neptune. So to be put on the spot like that, and it's being put on the spot. I have to not think, not be in my Mercury mind, not analyze, not consider whether or not it's a bucket locomotive or what TP. I just, something comes up on the screen, it will talk to me, Neptune, and that's the way to go. And so if anyone has an ability, desire, preference in doing that, then by all means, a psychic fair, by the minute, on the spot, a type of situation would be really good. If you're someone who is going to have to put things on a graph and see, the strength of the planet and do all the mental Mercury calculations prior to doing a reading, talk about stress.
Yeah.
So that's just my little quickie, and I could talk for an hour. In fact, I have a whole lecture on this, but I'm going to stop there.
Okay, and I know that's tough for you. I appreciate it, Ryan.
That's great, though. I mean, if you have the power, but you've got to have the talent.
Sarah, you got your hand up.
Yeah. So I was actually very well, I mean, I started out as working as a psychic on the street and at markets and stuff like that. But when I studied astrology, that was something I didn't have confidence doing, just giving someone a one-off, 15-minute, 10-minute. But some of the people that were teaching me astrology when I was studying it in the beginning were like, that's how you can really kind of cut your teeth, is just go to a psychic fair, come with us, do 15-minute readings. And I was very against it because I see something and I could talk for hours, right? So I'm like, how do I even give them something useful? So my anchor was, because it's a quick reading, you want to give people something positive to help them, give them a boost to help them feel good. That's the way I see it. I want to not give them something heavy to carry with them and have all these questions and confusion. So what I would do is, I would just play to the strengths of things like the rising or anything like Ryan was saying, something that stands out, because the chart is like a picture, right? So if you see a pretty flower or something, like, oh, that Venus is trining your Jupiter, or something like that, you might want to highlight that and talk about how it can benefit them. So that's usually what I would do, is in those 15 minutes, I'd try to just help them see something good about themselves so they can carry that energy with them and know that it's a part of them based on what's showing up in the schematic.
Yeah, that does teach you, doesn't it, how to hone in on the relevant parts of the chart. And it's amazing how effective that can be. I mean, years ago, I did a telephone. I didn't do psychic readings, but I did telephone readings, which was absolutely terrifying at first. And I hated doing it in the end because I felt like I spoke really quickly because I hated charging people. And some were little old ladies who obviously didn't have much money or something. Oh, God. So I gave it up. But it was very instructive because it did make you actually hone in very, very quickly. And very good lesson.
I just wanted to say it had its value, but it's not something I do now because I prefer to go very in depth. But it was great. It's kind of like a certain type of weights at the gym. So if you want to work out a certain type of fine muscle or whatever, it's good for that. But
I only do it for fundraisers, like there's Eyes of Learning out in Long Island, or the local Quest bookstore here in New York, when we were allowed to meet in person, would have little fairs to sort of raise money for that. And so I'll do it for that reason. I've also seen somebody literally do readings of just picking up an ephemeris and saying what day were you born, and just looking at the ephemeris, not even a rising sign. Eric, go ahead. You had your hand. You have your hand up. Mute.
I got it. Yeah, I had a very similar experience as Michaela and Sarah. I worked for 5 years for Aranum, if anybody's ever heard of that, which is pay per minute type readings, and it was exhausting, exciting, and horrible. So you're speaking very fast, so you're doing readings in 5 minutes or less. Which certainly exercise those muscles, as Sarah pointed out. I don't do them anymore. I don't like doing them, but it was an experience that I think was really beneficial in the long run. I do twice a year. I'm on a radio show, sometimes 3 times a year, where they do call in and they'll ask me quick questions, and I have to do readings and 2 to 3 minute answers for them.
Sure.
But as a general rule of thumb, I'm not a fan of them anymore, unless I'm in front of somebody who's like, astrology is not real. Well, do you have your birth data? Let me give me a couple minutes, and then I'll do it. I'll talk for 5-10 minutes, because non-believers are the most amazing clients ever. So
what I'll do is I'll look at what pops out at me. Like Ryan says, I look for sun, moon, rising, and then I look if there's a bundle or something. I'll also look to the personal planets, because I find if you can give them a characteristic trait that hits home right away, they'll open up to the rest of the reading. Like, oh, your Mars is in Capricorn. You plan first. You really don't rush into things. But things do pop up, like you just sit there and it's like, oh, I should look over here. And I will say I got drafted into doing something about 6 years ago. I went upstate to Lake George. There was an Asian Indian community that gathered every year, and I was hired as the entertainment for the weekend. They put me in a motel room next to the meeting center where they're all giving lectures and stuff. And I had a constant string of people coming to me for astrology readings. I must have done about 40 to 50 of them from from Friday night until Sunday morning. After that, I was no longer afraid of them.
Yeah, exactly.
And I got some great free Indian food. So, Mitch, go ahead.
Yeah, I have one question. Where do you guys get that yellow hand that you're putting up? I can't find it.
It's at the bottom somewhere.
I don't
reactions.
know. I couldn't find it. Anyway, I'll stick my hand.
There's a button that says reactions.
I used to do a lot of those kinds. Oh, there it is. I used to do a lot of those kinds of things. I would do weddings. I remember I did a wedding once where everybody stood online for 3.5 hours to talk to me for 5 minutes. I said to them, "Are you out of your mind? This is a wedding. Get drunk, have a good time, eat too much. What are you waiting to talk to me for 5 minutes?" And I still do a few of them as favors to old friends. But I also, what are you going to tell somebody?
Yeah.
I agree with Ryan and with Eric. You can grab certain things, absolutely. But I also found that people would stand online for hours to talk to me for 5 minutes. Every one of them took my card. And if I got one reading out of it, I was shocked.
Yeah, exactly.
They want it for free. That's what they're there for.
Yeah, of course.
And it's a very exciting, as you say, exciting and challenging thing. But I've gotten to the point where I kind of drifted away from it too, Tony. It's not. In fact, you once tried to get me to go up to that group. You remember that?
Up in India, Lake George. Yeah.
For whatever reason, I couldn't make it. I think I sobered up.
It wasn't a bad experience. Just when you have all those native Indians, the food was cooked by Indians, not in an Indian restaurant, and it was wonderful. Except when they got to the goat stew, because the Capricorn, I'm like, no goat stew for me. Thank you very much. Ryan, you have your hand up.
No goat.
Yeah, I suppose I would honestly recommend to any budding astrologer to do it.
Yeah. It's good
because if I hear everybody, I mean, I actually do it once a month, but I hear everybody, it is a stressor. It can be, there's all sorts of potential complications. Oh, let me talk about your Pluto and Virgo in the second house. Oh, you only have $10, which then honestly, real quickly, which then gives us a magnificent opportunity to give some one-liner like, "It's not your fault." And then oh God,
Yeah,
oh,
it's great. Yeah,
you know,
absolutely.
and so to be able to practice, you know, how to deliver in very
Yeah.
large, deep information in a very succinct time, amount of time in a presentation, that'd be great. So
That's right.
There's one Christmas party that I did every year for, and still would do it except for the pandemic, for this very, very high-end insurance company. And oh my God, the food, they had lobster and shrimp and it was the most amazing food in the world. And I would sit there and they had a tarot reader and they had me. And then one after another would come. And I had done it for so many years that I had, repeat people came back. And it paid very well. The people paid a lot of money, so it was certainly worth my time to do it that way. But Ryan, I agree. It's trial by fire.
Mm-hmm.
And it's got a purpose, and it does kind of force us, because let's face it, when you're starting out as an astrologer, you don't have 150 people waiting to talk to you. You've got to dig up your clients, and in some cases you literally have to dig them up. So it gives you a chance to do it one chart after another after another. And Tony, when I was doing these parties, most of them, now if I'm going to do it, I bring my laptop, but I used to do it with an ephemeris.
Mm-hmm.
And I'd just look along and and I'd have to bold stuff out of where and talk to them, and it was a very big learning experience. It was. I don't have the desire to do it so much anymore, unless it's for a fundraiser. I did a couple of them with you at Quest.
Yeah, actually, one of the clients I talked about with you years ago, I had done a reading. I was the entertainment at a dinner party in the Upper East Side in a fancy place, and I did like 10 charts. And 2 years later, this woman came to me and said that her doctor recommended me to go see me as an astrologer. And I'm like, what? And it turns out he was one of the guys I did at the at this dinner party. And I remember thinking to myself, I'm a doctor recommended astrologer. Wow, this is great. It's like as good as toothpaste, And then the woman that Mitch actually helped me with, this particular woman who had a serious cancer and was by the Mitch, I give big props to Mitch. You got a medical question. Mitch knows his stuff. So sometimes those things, they do sometimes lead to something like 2 years down the road where suddenly somebody pops up and says, my grandmother did a reading for me at a party and I want to hear from you now, So
I just had a client, a repeat client who took her birthday reading with me, and I looked at her chart and the whole family, and I warned her. I said, look, Neptune is all over your husband's chart and your chart and the composite chart, and I'm a little concerned about health issues. Are you vaccinated? Well, no, we don't. She just wrote me that they all have COVID, and the husband is in intensive care.
Oh boy.
So I'm hoping and praying.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you want to move on to a lighter question? You want to take something, Michaela? What do you want to do now? I do.
No, you go for another.
Something lighter, like the end of the world.
Okay.
Yeah.
Here's a simple.
What was your own most personally your one challenging transit? That's right.
Well, I will get to that, but here's a simpler one.
Oh, yeah, maybe.
I didn't have this on. I didn't have this on the list, but it occurred to me lately when I'm talking to people learning astrology. I tell them, really, you should think of it as 6 signs, not 12, because the pairs that the balance are not. And I'm just wondering, dichotomy wise, do you like to present it that way? What do you think about 6 signs as opposed to 12 in terms of the concept of astrology? Because Aries and Libra, Capricorn and Cancer, we're not, we're talking about. Sarah.
Definitely. I definitely think so. That was one of the first things I learned. Actually, I was lucky to get that in right away, because it helps you to contextualize so much more clearly all 12 signs. It makes so much sense, of course, that the antithesis, we could say, or the opposite polarity to Virgo would be Pisces, and Capricorn and Cancer. Like you said, of course, I think all signs are an individual in and of themselves, like an extreme, we could say, of the pole, of the polarity. But it's almost like to see the other side of that energy and how to balance that energy. It's imperative to know how the opposite end is expressing itself. Like just as a quick example, like with Leo, if Leo, let's just say Leo was all out of whack and completely obsessed with, attention or adoration, and was kind of just constantly like kind of threw out their self-actualization and became, whatever it is that the audience needed, almost like a puppet, we can see how they need to kind of go into the Uranian opposite and allow themselves to find out who it is they are, to find themselves, that individual, just as one very brief, one snippet of an example. Yeah.
Eric, you took your hand down, change your mind?
Oh no, I just was. It's just cleaner looking for me when it's not up there. So I teach a 12-week foundations course at least once a year, sometimes twice. And this is something that I emphasize when we're learning signs, is that polarity. I call it an axis, because then that kind of translates really well into houses, but understanding that they're equal and opposite. And it comes down to how the universe itself works. For every action, there is an equal but opposite reaction, and an object in motion, and that's how the signs work. And I think that chunking it like that is really very beautiful, and I find very effective with my students, switching from 12 to the axes instead.
Mitch, you got your hand up? Unmute.
Well, actually,
Okay.
I was just proud that I figured out how to put my hand up. Tony, polarity we know is very, very powerful. There's no question. As far as cutting it down to 6 signs, I
A little dramatic, yeah.
disagree. With what's the term? I mean, Capricorn isn't Cancer, and I know I'm more Capricornian than I like to admit. And I know many opposites who marry. There's that great sense of the circle being completed. But they each have their own personality. God help you if you tell a Virgo that they're Pisces. I mean, it's and they are very different. And while that's a good example, Virgo rules nursing, Pisces rules doctors. Who really heals you? The guy who cuts you open and takes the gallbladder out, or the person who sits with you for the next 6 weeks and mops your bowel and takes your temperature and feeds you and changes the bedpan and all the rest of that. And you need both in order to complete it. But they certainly are. They are of their own personality. Anyway, that's all I really want to say.
Yeah, they definitely have their own personality. I just think that there is kind of a mirror up, in some ways. I mean, Virgo's all about details and Pisces is all about no details. It's all one. So there's this kind of yin yang going on with all the signs in their own funny way.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, Virgos will cut you open, and
But but again, that does not mean that a Virgo and a Pisces are the same at all.
No, not at all. No.
So anyway, that's just my 2 cents.
Ryan.
Yeah, my 2 cents is that that everybody's right here.
Sagittarians, man. Why bring him into a discussion? Anyway.
Politics, my friend. He should run for office. There's no question about
it.
Okay. How do you inform a client, and what is your technique when it comes up to some really challenging transits? They've got, Pluto's going to roll over 4 of their planets the next 2 years, or Saturn's going to get into their grand cross and screw it up. How do you prepare them? What do you do to, in a generic way that reaches out? Mitch, your hand went up first. What the heck?
First of all, they pay me first.
Okay.
The truth of the matter is, Tony, that I've gotten to a point where I'm not a doomsday prophet. I never will be. But I'm also not a Pollyanna. And if they want my work, I'm not going to scare them. I go out of my way not to, certainly. It's never my goal. But they have to know what's what. What good am I to them if I'm BSing them?
Right.
Everything's going to be fine. Don't worry about it. Oh, they cut off your leg. You lose a leg, we'll help you find it. That's an old joke. They have to know. They have to know in the language that you use to help direct them. And always, look, I have, as you know, because I do so much medical work, I have clients with terrible problems, advanced cancer and whatever it might be, terrible, terrible issues. I never, ever give them anything but hope.
Yeah.
But when they come to me and they say to me, I have to choose between these two chemotherapies, and the doctors have told me this one has a better chance of maybe knocking out the cancer, but the side effects are disastrous. This one is a little calmer. What do you think? And I have to make those kinds of life choices. It's very difficult, but that's why they come to me. They don't come to me if they want to go out for tea and then go with their friends. They come to us for the truth. However we see it, it's a question of the individual's ability to give it to them, obviously in a calm and productive and positive. Anyway, that's all.
Ryan?
Yeah, that's probably one of the hardest questions there is for us astrologers, right? Here we are in the present moment. Someone comes to us, what am I going to do about this thing? We are in a moment where we are holding potential universes in our hand. We don't know which one is going to come into manifestation. All we can do as astrologers is look at the archetypology that's presented to us, that's before us, and describe as best as we can, as lovingly as we can, as encouragingly as we can, the potential futures that exist from this moment on. And we don't have control over what anybody's going to choose, just like we don't have any control over what they have chosen. And so all we can do is present the spectrum of possibilities based on the best we can do with the information we have with which to resonate towards whatever particular future. I can't tell somebody, oh, this bad thing is going to happen, just like I can't tell them this good thing is going to happen. I can say this is the spectrum. Pray, choose wisely. Even still, there's a chaos factor over which we have no control. So being as hopeful and loving while we describe the spectrum, I don't know what else we can do.
That's exactly what I would say.
Go ahead, Robin. Yeah, that's all?
Yeah, I mean, that was what I was gonna say if I was to say something.
Yeah, I mean, I do the same thing where it's like I had a client last night and Neptune was going to be crossing her natal Jupiter, and then the Jupiter return is going to come. And I said it can be a real good period of expanding, growth, opening up spiritually, but you can become foolishly confident, and you try to present like you can run into a brick wall at 90 miles an hour, or you could try to go around the brick wall, and you try to give them those options. And I put it in their hands. This is what Saturn's looking to have you do. You can try it this way or this way or this way. And I try to get them to understand what the mission statement of the transit is probably the best way to put it, and tell them, well, you can screw it up or you can do it this way or that way. And I give them some options just so they understand what the energies they're playing with, know. But no, I agree. It's a tough one.
The most important thing is to be true, because as you said, people will know who they know really. I mean, their own unconscious really knows the way it's going to go. So they want validation. And so it's to be true in a productive, constructive way, rather than be true in a harsh demolition type of
or in the case of that earlier client I mentioned, when is this Mars transit going to be over? It's like, no, you have to deal with it. And here are some ideas. Stop thinking you can just hunker down and pop up again. You'll be fine.
Process. Yeah, because everything is a process. Everything. Yeah, there is no end. It's
Sarah?
Yeah, I just wanted to add as well, because everyone's pretty much nailed it as far as I'm concerned. I mean, that's all we can do is be sincere, and be honest. But also, one thing that's so important to me is, where are the potential solutions as well? What options do you have? And give them as much power as possible, because it is their life.
Yeah,
they are. It is they are that angle of light. So no one is going to know how to navigate that better than them, even though we have the chart in hands that is the map essentially. So capitalizing on their skills and their gifts and their talents and trying to highlight those in face of whatever's coming up, because we don't even really fully understand how the mind works and how we interface with reality. In actuality, we really don't, especially when you consider, like Ryan was saying, the chaos factor, like the quantum field, dark matter, whatever, when we're interfacing with reality. So I don't know, personally, I just wanted to reiterate that and add that from my perspective, feeling empowered and feeling like there are more than one solution, unfathomable amounts of solutions that maybe we just haven't seen. And then here's some practical ones as well, right?
Yeah.
Like to not just go crazy out into rainbows and unicorn land, but also be open to the unimaginable at the same time too.
Exactly. So right. And how can we judge anyway? How can we judge what's good and what's bad in the end? Even the most harsh transit can actually have a huge gift with it that will take you, as you just said, Anthony, to the next place you need to go. No. So we can't judge that. Yeah.
And I like, Sarah, you used the word empower them. It's exactly what I like. Yeah. And in the course of my Pluto transits, by the way, and I was ready for it. When I first became an astrologer, I saw Pluto was going to screw me up in my mid 60s, and I've been waiting for it. And I got hit by a car crossing the street. Luckily, it was they were making a turn, so it wasn't I wasn't hit too fast. But then it turns out that I ended up settling, and an operation that my wife needed for like 10 years that everybody denied us, we now had the money to get her. And I'm okay. I have a partial knee replacement, but I'm getting around okay, and then my dentist said I need major work done. And I said, I'll have to find another car, to hit me. But the realization of that first hit by a car, you think to yourself, oh my God, this is terrible. But then we've been trying to save up for this operation for 10 years, and by the way, I'm hit by the car. What's the first thing I do?
Look at the time.
I look at the time so I can have a chart. I'm lying in the street and I'm like, what time is
this
my
is
car?
Great.
Oh, Pisces rising. Okay. Oh yeah, somebody call an ambulance. Anyway. So
wonderful.
Yeah, that's the way. And then of course I went to the Quest bookshop and did a lecture about my own car accident, 2 weeks later. So everything becomes everything becomes grist for the mill with an astrologer, I guess.
Absolutely.
Okay. You have no questions left? I can ask one more. We have about 15 minutes left. So did you have one you wanted to ask, or I can?
You go ahead.
Okay. What transit did you personally have the most trouble with in your life? For me, it's been this Pluto transit. Even anticipating it, it went over my Venus, it went over my midheaven, my North Node, my Chiron, Mercury, and it's finishing up my Sun now. So it's been quite an experience. I did have Neptune and Saturn conjunct on my Sun in 92 or so, but Neptune and Uranus, excuse me. But I barely noticed it. Neptune made everything kind of vague. It's like, I guess I'm going through something. So that didn't bother me as much. But the Pluto transit on 3 of my planets and my Centaur and my North Node in midheaven, and I'm wrapping it up now, but it's been a challenge. Mitch, you want to, and then Eric, you can go next. Yeah, Mitch.
The hardest transit I ever had was my birth.
And when is that going to be over?
There were a couple of others. I had Neptune cross my moon ascendant when I decided to run to California because I was going to be a rock star. And when we have more time sometime, Tony, over tea, I'll tell you the whole story of how I went from Tucson to LA to Tucson to LA to Tucson for about over a year, trying to figure out where I belonged. And Neptune was so confusing. I had no idea. But I was in music. It was my career at the time. And in New York, if you want to get see a record executive, you call for a year and a half. When I was in LA, I picked up the phone and I called A&M Records. The woman says to me, "Who are you?" I said, "I'm a singer-songwriter from New York." She says, "Hold on a second." He puts me on with Lance Freed, who ran the publishing. He says to me, "Come on down. I'll put you in the studio this afternoon." Neptune is very powerful. And you never know. And I did some great recordings and whatever it was. But complete illusion, complete and total Neptunian Anyway, somebody else.
Sometimes
Okay.
that's good, you know.
Oh, I hope it was fun at least. Eric.
Great fun.
Yeah, there's two. I mean, one was when Uranus went over my sun, and I'm not even going to get into that because that was a nightmare, but and not what I expected. But I mean, what can you expect with Uranus, right? It was everything that I didn't think it was. But the hardest transit I ever had was it was a double transit. So I was in the middle of my Saturn return, and it was one of those like triple passes. So it was kept going back over it. But at the same time, Neptune was squaring my Saturn in the middle of this.
Okay.
So it really broke down a lot of it. It intensified my anxiety, my panic. I started to depersonalize. So like I couldn't tell what was real. It was like, oh my God, I can't tell if I'm awake or asleep. Like I had a total nervous breakdown until I got to the other side of that. But what I think is important with these harsher outer planet transits is they take so long that a lot of times we can't see the good that it's going to do because we don't experience a full cycle. So that's my hardest, but there's always a silver lining in there somewhere. We can't quite step far enough back to see it.
When you're in it, yeah, when you're in the eye of the storm, you can't always see, but yeah, there always is. There
Yeah, I
always
think we will in the next lifetime. I'll be like, oh yeah, that's how that
That's
was
what-
beneficial, right?
That was good, really.
Yeah.
I should have been grateful for that pain.
I don't know how you guys feel,
Very
but
challenging.
of all the planets, I find Neptune to be the most difficult. In fact, when I look at a chart sometimes,
Takes you
I will
somewhere.
look at the chart for 15 minutes and I can't find Neptune. It's sitting right there, but
Yeah,
it
it's
hides,
hiding,
it sneaks
hiding.
away.
Yeah.
Well, it's
I mean,
like the discovery of Neptune. They discovered it twice by different people who thought they discovered two different planets, which is about as Neptunian as you can get. You know, Michaela, you were saying something. I'm sorry.
Yeah. I was just saying, yeah, I had a Neptune transit over my ascendant in Pisces that went over my ascendant, and that sort of broke things down for a while. Things were sort of, even this, you know, I had a house that I let with a swimming pool. Great, but even the swimming pool under a Neptune on my ascendant broke, and I was trying to sell the house too, because if I didn't sell this house, I was going to be in a lot of trouble. Well, I couldn't sell the house, and then that happened, and it was just one disaster after another, and Neptune was breaking everything, even leaks. All the ceiling was leaking it's terrible. So Neptunian. Anyway, then came along at the solstice of 2017. Saturn was on the solstice at 0 degrees Capricorn, 2017, Christmas. And my Venus is at 0 degrees Libra. So it was exactly square on the solstice, the 21st of December. So all these breakdowns, the sail had fallen through for the third time. End of the money, really. There were some guests coming for Christmas. and then my partner just told me he was leaving. So, and on the 21st of December, I thought, this is perfect, like you did. This is perfect. Saturn is squaring my Venus. And this is a very meaningful Saturn right on 0 degrees Capricorn is very meaningful anyway. And so it caught my Venus right at the end of all this Neptune transit. And because I knew the astrology, it just gave me a different perspective. And I just rose up and I said, at first I was devastated. Everything went wrong. The Christmas was ruined and I had no money except if I took these people in. And I had to get down there by myself then. I was ill. But I thought, I've got to rise to this occasion because Saturn squaring my Venus. So I said, go. I will get these people in myself. I will get this money. Somehow I'm going to get through this. And I will be Saturnian and I will just get hold of this thing. And somehow I did it. It was terrible because there were people in there having a great time over Christmas. And anyway, it's a whole fast, but I made it through it. And it was a huge challenge. And that really taught me something because although it was devastating, rising to the challenge of it actually taught me that I could do what I never thought I would be able to do and take what I couldn't. So, yeah. Exactly. That's my one.
Robin, you got your hand up?
Robin?
Yeah.
Okay.
I find that all of the outer Saturn, Uranus, Neptune, Pluto are all, extremely difficult. But what I find also what makes a big difference is, for me, anytime one of those planets transits my moon, to be the most intense. And then, of course, when I had a Saturn transit, when I had my Saturn return, Neptune was opposing my sun at the same time, and Jupiter. So I found the combination of having, multiple outer planet transits to inner planets to be, or at points to be the most intense.
Intense, yeah.
Yeah, but yeah, it's also what is being at, the sun and the moon and the ascendant, probably, anytime any of those planets transit those points in your chart, that's going to be the most intense.
But just to think what it would be like if you didn't have the astrology and you couldn't recognize that.
Well, yeah, the whole thing about astrology is
exactly
to be aware of it being part of a greater cycle in your life and growth, and that there is a progression with it, and that it will come, the intensity will wane.
Yeah, and there is a meaning to it. There is a meaning, and you are a different person often at the end of a heavy transit.
Right. It's so helpful to be able to see that.
Yeah.
And to help others to be able to see that when they're going through it.
Yeah. And that's necessary now. Yeah.
One of my favorite clients are the kinds that, as you're talking to them and you say, well, basically you've been in complete alignment with all of your transits. I just did somebody whose entire marriage exploded and just finished up like 3 months ago. And I said, and I'm saying, well, Pluto did this and that. And she's like, yep. And I said, now you're moving here. And she said, I'm doing that. And you're like, go in peace. You hear your chart astrologer, and those are the reasons that I really enjoy the most, because it's like, well, you got it. I'm here to kind of pat you in the back and say, go out there and do some more. But some people can tune in. Me, I like having the astrology chart. And funny thing is, I don't have too much trouble with Saturn transits, but I have 3 planets in my midheaven in Capricorn, so Saturn's an old friend for me. I find like Jupiter and Uranus, I gotta cut loose. Wait a minute, I can't do that. I've got to be controlled and well behaved. So so Saturn I have a problem with it. In Neptune, I have a Neptune square in my chart, so I have no problem zoning out.
Depends what you've got in there.
Yeah, part of it is what you're already dealing with.
Exactly.
But Pluto and Uranus drive me the craziest, so.
Yeah.
So we're just about at 85 minutes instead of 90. I don't have any more questions that really open up. Is there anything?
One we can finish on? Yeah, something?
I don't have anything really lighthearted. I think I went through everything, and the only other one I have would be kind of heavy. So we're doing these, Sue, we're still doing these 5 times a year for next year. Was that the general plan?
Yeah, whenever you want to do them, we'll put them on the schedule. So, just let's figure out every other month if you want to do it that way, or however you want to do it, just let me know and we'll put it on the schedule.
So I will say to anybody here, if you have questions you think would be good for general, like lighthearted discussion or loose discussion, part of the reason what I like about AstroSpeak is that so much of the EA Zoom stuff is like somebody talking for an hour, and it's like very strong and very lesson oriented. And I like the playfulness we're having here, just bouncing ideas around. So that's the goal to me of AstroSpeak.
Yeah,
is more of a Gemini kind of feel. And so anybody has questions, they want to submit them to me or Sue or Michaela for the next time we do this. And other astrologers that might have fun joining in and making fun of each other, or whatever it is we do here. Definitely, I'm open for it. But I don't know. I think we're done here today, unless somebody has anything in particular you just want to add for the hell of it. Anybody?
I have a quick question that like seriously is just like a one-word answer out of everyone. So I'm getting my first child is going to be born any day now, sometime between now and January 5th. And I'm muddling over when to time the actual birth, because I'm going to be in there with a stopwatch. So should I time it when he comes out or when I cut the umbilical cord? Although I'm probably going to have 2 charts and just kind of watch them through his life.
He takes his first breath.
Yeah,
First
supposedly
Yeah, that's my, it's the first breath.
Which is
Yeah.
when you cut the umbilical
cries.
That too, yeah.
Well, when they cry.
when they
Yeah.
cry. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, my wife was actually rubbed into consciousness. They didn't make her cry. Back in
Oh.
1964, she had a really forward-thinking, my mother had a forward-thinking obstetrician, and they actually massaged her into consciousness. She didn't cry.
Really?
But yeah, anytime anybody's living, the minute you're independent of the mother is when your life, to me, starts here. But that's my interpretation. Ryan,
That's why I thought the cutting of the umbilical cord.
Right, except sometimes they delay the cutting. I mean, some doctors or midwives will choose to delay the cutting.
Yeah, we're gonna delay cord cutting by at least 5 to 7 minutes.
So, yeah,
when
so
I
in that
had my
case-
daughter, oh sorry, Robin, go ahead.
Yeah, I would go with the first breath, you know.
Yeah. I mean, that's traditional from ancient Egypt.
Yeah.
Ryan?
Oh, I didn't know
Always
that.
been traditional. Yeah. Yeah.
Sure, if you think about it, the reason we cast a chart at birth is, and not so much traditionally at the moment of the gestation or anytime during gestation or fertilization or anything like that, is because the baby is inside the energy field of the mother.
Yeah.
And if we consider physically the effects of astrology, then what we'd want to do is take a snapshot of that baby's soul the moment they separate fully from the energy field of the mother. Call
And
that
that's
what
usually
you
when
will.
they take their breath. Yeah.
Enter the
But
world.
it comes out if the child comes out in the water, when that baby is fully removed from the field of the mother, that's the moment that's the second I would take the snapshot. The breath, maybe the umbilical cord, but the energy field, because that's the tone that's then set in my experience and observation.
I'm with Ryan on that one. That's what I did with my daughter. Like, as soon as she came out, I was like to the midwife, what time is it? Like, immediately, what time is it? Because we didn't actually cut the umbilical cord until it stopped pulsating, which took a while. It had to have been, it could have been like 10 minutes, honestly. So maybe, Eric, it might be a good idea to take 2.
Yeah, I just wanted some input. I am gonna take 2, and I'm gonna probably just watch them through his life. And maybe when I'm like 60 something, I can write a paper of my observations. But
well, Sarah, you were saying before they cut the cord, it was like 10 minutes, but was the baby breathing at that point?
Oh, honestly, I don't know, because I was, I just had a baby. So I was kind of just I was holding her. I was like, so I mean, I honestly have no idea. All I know is she peed on me almost right away. So other than that, I don't know if she was breathing.
She marked her territory. That's good. And honestly, I mean, 10 minutes is what, 3 degrees. So it's not like, or 4 degrees. It's not like it's going to be suddenly like this kid's it's a psycho kill here and a saint over here in 5 minutes.
Well, that's on the cusp.
Yeah.
On the cusp.
My children all breathed prior to the cutting of the umbilical cord.
Okay. Well, on that note, good luck. You're going to have a little baby Capricorn, huh?
A lot of Capricorn in this chart. A lot of Capricorn. Aquarius.
Yeah, it would be. And that Stallone's mother timed her C-section according to her astrology.
Oh wow!
Which I don't think that's exactly cool, but that's me. So
sometimes when there's a difficult decision to do, that's pretty. I mean, I had a C-section, and I had to decide whether to have the C. They gave me an option, and I looked at the chart, and I thought, wow, that looks like a lot of blood to me. Everything was in Scorpio, squaring Uranus, and everything, and where it was. And I said, I thought that looks like a lot of blood. I think I'll go for the C-section. And as the surgeon was doing it, he said, God, you made a right decision. There would have been a lot of blood, and you and the baby could have gone into shock. So just, astrology again can tell you, nothing is written in stone.
Yes.
It's an option. Yeah.
Although I do think choosing the date of a C-section to help your son get famous is a little strange. And it worked.
Hey,
It worked for
worked.
Sly. It didn't work for Frank. It didn't work for Frank
Maybe I
Stallone.
should have tried that.
Yeah,
My
no.
son's
So,
an actor.
and of course, she found a doctor that did it, but I'm assuming that's California. But I don't know.
Hey.
And she was an astrologer herself, I believe.
Yeah,
Don't
exactly.
swim
exactly.
into that.
Yeah, she was. She
Well,
is.
Happy New Year, happy holidays to everybody.
You too.
This
You
was a lot of fun, and we'll see who shows up next year for whatever we do. If that's
Brilliant. Thank you
Happy
all.
New Year, everybody.
Great. You too.
Thank you
everyone.
all.
Happy
Thank
you.
you, Sue.
Thank you.
Take care.
Au revoir.